I'll pass it off to you.
Sue will come up when we.
Okay, Em and I are gonna do
Yeah.
a trade-off show. I'm the technical, the geotechnical nerd. I'm my policy ignorance is wide and deep, so. Um, but I've been working on CCS projects since the nineties. And I did the first injection for the saline formation of CO2 and that's in Liberty County in 2004. Anyway, it was like a trendsetter. So what are we talking about? Where carbon from burning fossil fuel goes up in the atmosphere. We don't want that. We have an option to capture it and put it deep well inject it where it stays underground permanently. That's the goal here. The new goal. It's there are a couple things people get wrong. The first is that this is a brand new technology and that we're being guinea pigs and that we should I don't know, it's too hazardous and so forth. It's not true. The purpose is new, but the technologies that make that purpose work are old. So we have a lot of experience combining these technologies, 50 years of experience, basically. The capture technologies that allow you to capture the CO2 and keep it from going in the atmosphere from a power plant or any other source. It's called the amine capture. It was used for cleaning up gas when methane gas was first produced. Deep well injection for waste fluids has been going on since the 30s. In an oil field context. The modern CO2 injection for CO2 as a solvent to enhance production, declining fields in the Permian started using this in the 1970s. And done huge volumes. These not trivial amounts so that's running how long? 50 some years. The permitting for deep well injection was available in Texas, but was made a national standard in the Safe Drinking Water Act 1974. So this deep well injection as a cluster has been permitted for a long period of time. U.S. is really wealthy. We have expertise that other nations envy in terms of permitting skills. The CO2 injection for climate management started in the 90s in Norway. Norway wanted to bring on new gas resources that had some CO2 in them, but they didn't want to increase their greenhouse gas footprint because they have a lot of hydro. So they wanted, for purposes of keeping CO2 out of the atmosphere, they started their project called Sleipner, was the eight-legged horse of Odin. Anyway, Sleipner project has been running successfully, continues to run, doing about 1 million tons a year since 1996. There's extremely well-known, beautiful data they collect about how this works. Ask questions, go for it. My tests, first one, US, first one, Texas, saline injection, not for the OR, saline injection was 2004. I get personally bent out of shape when people say this is new, and I think, can't you see my gray hair? I've been doing this since I was a kid, basically. So, what do you mean it's new? Maybe it's new to you. That's okay. Please ask questions, but don't tell me that it's too new, that we know nothing about it. It's not true. I've been doing this. I myself have been doing this. So, and the national rule in the U.S. is 2010 for this specific to CO2. So it's called CLAP. It's got tons of jargon. I'll try not to drown you, but if you want to know, it's underground injection control class 6. The second thing that was a misconception is that CCS is risky, too risky. You just can't have it, too risky. And it's partly the fault of researchers like me and people at national labs because we keep investigating those risks. I'll talk about risks. I'm blue in the face. Our group tries to make things go wrong. It's one of the things we do is in the lab or in our field test, what would happen if, and we go out and find out and then we're all excited about it. And this message somehow escapes and people think that's normal. No, we made a bad thing happen just so we can find out how it happens and what we should do about it. But it hasn't happened. It doesn't happen. So we have the community has extensive experience with deep well injection with CO2 handling, and a few things have gone wrong. It's on the dozens of things that have gone wrong, that are significant gone wrong things, but not hundreds. So you want to, what about this? What about that? What about happened there? Yeah. So things have gone wrong. The way to think about that is, the car mechanic, we've seen this vehicle before. The mechanic can fix it. We know engineering is good. You won't have this problem because we've taken that, we no longer have that problem. it's a mature industry. None of the dozens of incidences have been particularly egregious or traumatic or problematic. They're just, their dollar amounts are small, their impact, nobody died, So there's some things that went wrong, yes, but they don't permeate the whole environment. It's not risky. It's actually a very well run, very straightforward, intrinsically safe, strictly regulated type activity. So don't let this story or that story dominate. You need to know most of the time, most of the places is running smoothly, has been. I did it with no problem, and I'm not a wizard. Uh, the pipelines have a long and strong safety record. Yeah, there was an incident. Yep, an incident in all those pipelines and all those years of operation. It's a very good record of safety. Um, Emma,
Oh, me.
Emma is going to do the policy pieces to keep me out of trouble.
Yeah, and we're not even, let me figure out which way this goes in a way. Yeah.
That's
Okay. And I'm not even getting to Texas policy quite yet. We'll be back to Sue before I cover that. But just wanted to start off before Sue walks in depth and in detail on those capture technologies. I just wanted to take a step back and explain why people are looking at Texas for carbon management today and why companies and operators are interested in doing their projects here. And in sum, Texas essentially has every single factor that you want when you're considering a carbon management project. The state has a large concentration of power and industrial facilities. It has excellent geology for Class 6 CO2 injection. It has a highly skilled workforce that is knowledgeable in everything that you need to build a pipeline, build an injection well. It has the largest network of CO2 pipelines in the United States. And the state's electric grid, energy resources, and existing industrial base in general position it well for emerging technologies connected to carbon management, like hydrogen production and direct air capture. So when you put all those together, it's not surprising that operators are looking here. But we know that there are those main factors that make it suitable for Texas, but it's important to know why operators are interested beyond that. And it's because, in general, carbon management can help support industrial growth in the state, attract investment, maintain competitiveness in global markets, and create new revenue streams for Texas businesses and communities. And one of the main reasons that the state and operators are interested is because of the 45Q tax credit. This is the main incentive for carbon dioxide capture, injection. And in Texas, 700 facilities are eligible for this tax credit. The industrial facilities or power plants that are claiming this credit can receive up to $85 per ton of carbon dioxide stored in a geologic formation, while direct air capture projects can receive up to $180 per ton of carbon dioxide that's stored underground. In addition to those federal incentives at a lower level, there are also companies that might benefit from emerging low carbon fuel and carbon markets. So, for example, California's low carbon fuel standard allows regulated fuel providers, including those out of state, to purchase credits from projects that reduce emissions. And then projects may also generate revenue through voluntary carbon markets, where companies might be purchasing credits to help meet corporate climate and sustainability goals. And then another reason folks are looking at CCS in Texas in general is as operators are looking to be competitive in global markets, where we're seeing this increased demand for low carbon fuels and products. Carbon capture and storage is one of the ways that we can get there. Okay. There's a couple more reasons that folks might be interested in carbon capture and storage in Texas, because beyond those emissions reductions benefits and the profit that operators can make, carbon capture and storage can also create opportunities for landowners, local communities, and the state. They can generate revenue through pore space agreements, lease payments, taxes, and other economic activity that's associated with project development. So we're seeing interest from ports and regional economic development organizations across the state who are looking at carbon capture and storage as a way to attract investment support existing industries, and create new revenue streams. And for some regions, particularly those who are facing changes in the traditional oil and gas industry, carbon storage could be a new economic pathway for those regions to consider. And we've seen interest emerge in places like Corpus Christi and Port Arthur, where local leaders have explored carbon management as part of their broader industrial growth strategies. And then you can see here on the right, I've placed a couple of excerpts from studies that have tried to quantify, okay, what could this economic benefit look like for Texas? One of those, an analysis by Angelo Economics, found that 4 CCUS projects across 12 counties could support 7,500 jobs and 1.8 billion in state level impact. And that's just in those 12 counties. We don't have a in-depth state level analysis, but another group, the Rhodium Group, estimated that retrofitting 90 facilities in the state, and like I said, 700 facilities are eligible for this credit. So just retrofitting those 93 facilities could create 28,000 jobs and attract up to 62 billion in private investment. But in order to realize all of these benefits, stakeholders across the state and the legislature are going to need to take a look at the policy framework that's needed to support the expansion and growth of this technology. All right, one last slide, I think, before I pass it back to Sue here, is that, like I said, operators are interested in this technology, and here is our current proof. So today, Texas has 19 proposed storage projects. One of those has already received a Class 6 permit, and collectively, these projects include plans for 67 injection wells. It's worth noting none of these are injecting quite yet, and that these numbers do not include Class 2 wells, which you may have heard of. These are used for something called enhanced oil recovery that Sue will cover later. Most of these permits started with the EPA and were transferred over to the state when it received something called Class 6 primacy, which again I'll cover later on in the presentation. But in sum, what I'm trying to show here is that while many of these projects are still moving through the permitting process and have been proposed in the last several years, this level of activity demonstrates the sudden strong growth and interest we've seen in this technology in the state. Oh, I had one more. So one last note. As Sue mentioned earlier, CCS isn't a new technology. The US has more than 50 years of commercial experience with carbon capture, carbon dioxide transport. There are 5,000 miles of carbon dioxide pipelines and dozens of projects today. What is new is this pace of growth that you can see on the chart on the right here. Globally, there are 77 operating projects and more than 650 in development. And if you look back in 2010, I think it's almost quadrupled since then. So this growth in general is reflecting that increased policy support that I mentioned with the 45Q tax credit and interest across the US.
Okay. And the world.
And the world.
A lot of that growth is Europe, Australia, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, all that growth. So I'm going to blitz through how do you capture, which is not actually my area of expertise. I'm quoting my colleague Gary Rochelle and others. This is post-combustion capture. So you have a facility up here that's doing its usual things. That big arrow, that's the energy out. If you want to you have to do pollution control. That's the energy in. You have to take out SOx and NOx and criterion pollutants so we don't have smoke coming out of smokestacks. They're no longer called smokestacks. Thank you, pollution control. Now we don't want the CO2 to come out. We have to add another gizmo, and and it takes CO2 out. It's a solvent process. I'm not gonna tell you about it. I can if you want to. See, there's more energy in. So if you want to see if this is really getting you where you want to go, you have to add up the energy in against the energy out, make sure you're getting where you want to go. It's called life cycle analysis. It's a big thing. It's important. A lot of things that are speculated about don't meet the standard. So we're trying to find the things. This post-combustion capture with amines does. It has a parasitic load. Some of the energy is lost. You have to derate the plant in order to add capture on it, and that's why it costs money. So a lot of the money goes to capture, and it's because it's not as energy efficient. If you want to bash CCS, bash those energy in, it's true. I consider it like garbage disposal. I tell all the garbage disposal off, but those guys use gas while they pick up my garbage. I want garbage disposal. I'm going to have it. Even if they use some energy picking up my garbage, I need the garbage disposal. That works. This and it takes CO2 out into the pipeline. Here's the one working in Texas. It's working. And here's where those facilities are. You see the two towers. This is in outside of Houston and Sugarland. Sending the CO2 for enhanced oil recovery. I'll tell you more about that. And why did we do it for enhanced oil recovery? Because this was before 45Q. This got them going, that they could manage to get this capture process up and running, and do a demo. Uh, it's had various troubles. I can tell you all the blood and thunder. It's running. It works. It's doing it. You can do direct air capture. People love this. Investors love this. It's sucking it straight out of the air. It seems very pure. Engineers get stressed about it because the concentration in the atmosphere is quite low. It's going up, but it's not going up at anything like the rate that we need to make capture cheaper. So it's high energy. See, there's a big arrow. It's separate though. These guys do what they do. Nobody messes with them. Cars, facilities, whatever's doing that. And then we add on someplace else, like a pull down from the atmosphere. It has a big fan, uses some of the same processes. It takes more energy because you have to um, take low concentration to high concentration. Sends the CO2 out. There's several of them running. Occidental Petroleum has two projects in Texas. One that's about to be commissioned. Their well is permitted, but they don't have their direct air captures set up in the West Texas. They also have one in Claiborne County. Here's Emma at one. All right, so they exist. They're going. You can oxy-fired. I'm not going to talk about this very much. It's an existing process. Use it for making glass. There's some companies that are trying. I was a religious believer in oxy-fired for a while. Still waiting. Come on, guys. Come on, come on, come on. You have to burn impure oxygen. So then you get then you get CO2 coming out the back end without any atmosphere in it. I should explain. Atmosphere is mostly what comes out of burning is nitrogen. And you don't want to compress that and send that down because it's a pain in the neck. And nitrogen is a pain in the neck to compress. It's an ideal gas. You keep paying for it every inch of the way. You have to strip out the CO2, which is a non-ideal gas. You can compress the CO2, get it down more easily. So why we do capture is to get the nitrogen out of the picture. Hydrogen, you can make hydrogen too, or ammonia. This is quite popular. Growing thing. So if you make hydrogen, you do pre-combustion capture. You never burn you don't burn it till you get the hydrogen, but you spend the energy processing the natural gas to decarbonize it, and then you take the CO2 out from that. We could talk more about that. I'm not going to get in the weeds because there's a couple choices of blue and green and sort of hydrogen things. Okay. We got it. We caught it. We got it in a compressed fluid. It's sometimes called supercritical, or people freak out because they've heard of supercritical mostly for nuclear reactors. This is a physics word. It doesn't mean at all the same thing. It has nothing to do with the word that you've heard about for nuclear reactors. Nothing. It means what physicists mean. It's a pressure and temperature that there's no difference between gas and liquid. So I always call it dense phase, which communicates better. It means it's kind of liquid-like, but with some gas compressibility in its system. Sometimes in the pipeline, it's real liquid, depending on how cold it is. But so it's better to say just dense phase. It's going. There are pipelines running. We have pipeline guys, and we're going to see pipelines at the demo. So you can talk more about pipelines. They work. I have pipelines. I treasure my pipelines in my yard myself. They take my sewage away. It's much more hazardous than CO2. I really, really like pipelines to keep things contained and managed. I don't know why everybody else hates them. They work. They work. They have a very good safety record. You can also take it by truck or by boat. Boat's very interesting because we can take it out to places in the deep well injected offshore underneath the ocean bottom in the same sort of rocks. We're not putting it in the ocean, but we put it under the ocean, which has various pleasant aspects. Yeah.
Help me understand. So the truck on the top is holding a certain amount, how much, like, let's say that came from a smokestack, that we
Yeah.
don't call it anymore. How many days worth or whatever?
Trucks are pretty small.
Yeah.
They don't really do the deed. This is a truck bringing CO2 to my experiment where we are doing a small injection for a short duration.
Okay.
So trucks, also you have to carry it as cold liquid, and in Texas it's a pain in the neck because Texas is hot. So either you have to deliver it immediately or you have to have a strong truck that can hold a lot of pressure, or our trucks had to vent it on the way. So they were very inefficient. Trucks are, a lot of people talk about trucks. I've talked to people, but I don't think anybody has a working scheme that involves very many trucks yet, because they're burdened by smallness and a lot of penalties in the transport. Ships, there's a lot of people gung ho about ships. I myself am not the expert on ships, but if you want to know more about ships, I know where to find them. Yeah,
So how safe is to transport that on a truck?
much more dangerous than a pipeline.
So
Truck-
why-
trucks
why-
have-
Why are we doing all this clean made of trucks?
Well, we take it in a truck because we are not running a project long enough to, it's a pilot test, so you wouldn't build a pipeline just for a few days injection. So,
So how,
or you take trucks to, this truck usually delivers to Budweiser. So, and they want it at that rate. So it takes it off of a pipeline and ships it to, beer plants, which aren't not taking the volumes that need to, that's sufficient to build a pipeline.
so how far does the truck go? Is it 2 hours, 3 hours, or how?
These ones could go for a long time, but they have to, as it heats up, they have to vent the CO2. So you lose some of it, you're going backwards. That isn't necessary, especially on ships, they can manage it with on-deck equipment. I think you're at the edge of my knowledge about transporting CO2 in vehicles, though. I really know about the subsurface. I can get you more info, if you want to know more about, I have a student, unfortunately, she has a 2-week-old baby, but I do have a student who knows a great deal about transport. So how's it injected? People have an idea that underground, people sometimes say in the soil, it's under your basement. No, it has to go down by law, below fresh water. Fresh water is protected. And we want to get it to where it's dense phase, so that's 800 meters or about a half a mile. And it goes down, so it's deep. People don't have an intuition about how.
The model right there.
There's a model right there. How deep is how deep is deep? When you stand up here and you're lowering a tool, you think, I'm excited, I'm excited. They say, go get lunch. The tool's running, it's going fast. It's a long way. A mile down is a mile. It's a long way down, which is very important to understanding the safety, the risk, the permanence. We're going down to and yeah, it's down there. We know a lot about it. These Exxon people can tell you chapter and verse about what's down there. Yeah, it's going down. It's going down at high pressure because we want to keep it dense phase. And because the fluids down there are under pressure, as you go in a swimming pool, you feel your ears pressure. So you go down a mile, it's a tremendous amount of pressure. Don't do it. That's why you can't do deep sea diving without anyway, it has to go in enough pressure to displace the water out at those depths. Pressure is a hazard, has to be managed. It's normal for working with the subsurface. It's below many, many layers of rock. I brought a model too. This one's a working model. That we have, so scale, I keep trying to get a train. If people think of this as an ant farm, if there's an ant farm, you're the size of an ant, all right? Are you to scale? So this is a mile down. And up here is the fresh water. The fresh water is pushed around by rainfall and pumping and spring discharge, etc. This is the fresh water kept fresh. Below it is brine, about 3 times saltier than seawater in general. That's the target, is this brine. You can't mess with the fresh water. It's protected by Safe Drinking Water Act 1974, protected urgently, strongly, regulatory, and successfully. That we don't have contamination events from class 1 or there aren't any class 6 wells operating yet, but and it's monitored, it's protected. So I have a facility here that's releasing CO2 to the atmosphere, and I'm capturing it and compressing it. All right, who thinks I should stop committing. Here's a pipeline. I constructed the pipeline. You can feel as you feel. The pipeline's been constructed. I drilled a well a mile deep. It's perforated open to the formation here. I should explain. These formations that are fluid, full of fluid are these. So they accept fluid. People think rocks are solid. These rocks are solid, but they accept fluid. Does anybody like to handle it? I'll send it around. So it's a little counterintuitive. How come this rock staying in the fluid is a very special rock? No, it's a very typical rock. Why? If we blew it up, if you take yourself to the size of an ant, and these are so these marbles are the sand grains here. You ready? Fluids go right smack through them. All right, those fluids represent the CO2 moving through the spaces in between the sand grains. Sometimes people think it's necessary to have a great big pore, great big hole, a cave. No, this is the process. There are some caves in the subsurface, not very many, not very useful, we don't use them for CCS, partly because they don't give us the retention that we want. Here, if you think this is too primitive, there's a 35X model of CO2 that Mississippi Power was trying to set up for injection. So, all right, so that's the stuff here. I have also layers that will not accept any fluid. I brought a piece of one. I have kids and they go to kids and they try to say, I think it's taking it now. No, so you can pass this one. It will not accept fluid. And that's so the orange layers represent the layers that want to take fluid. The blue saline water is this actually glass beads, just smaller ones than this. It will take fluid. All right, you ready? Is this going to be exciting?
Yeah.
No. It's extremely boring. And anyone who really wants to know needs to come up and look. It's very quiet. So people come out and they want to take their camera. Something's going to happen. We're living up here at the surface. Something's going to happen. Are you ready with your camera? Nothing much is going to happen. The CO2 that was going in the atmosphere is going in the pipeline. Charging the pipeline is moving critical fluid. It's going down here at the bottom. It's starting to accumulate, move through here, accumulate there. Okay. At displaced water, we're going to talk about displacing water. Displacing water into a tank here because my sample of the earth is very small. It's an actual real effect and it has a legislative significance. So I displace some water out of it. Look at it accumulate. Okay, how long will this be stored? As far as I can tell, it's stored forever. In order to get it out, cleaned out and start again, I have to turn the earth on its side. It won't ever come out. There's another reason it won't ever come out. Let's see if I go back to PowerPoint. So very deep, it's going down. It's a dense fluid. It's going into these small spaces. I forbid you to think about big spaces. Small spaces, the ones that are in that rock are the ones that's true. It's those tiny spaces, and the physics of those tiny spaces are very important to understand the policy aspects of CO2 storage. It's because of a thing we call, big word is hysteresis. The history matters. The CO2 will go in and it won't come out. How can that be? All right.
Sue,
yeah.
would you mind moving a little closer to the camera? You're not
Um,
super on the table.
All right, am I good? I'm trying to, all right, actually this is a better place. So the CO2 started coming in and I'm plotting the saturation in the rock versus the permeability, how fast the fluid can move, how easily, how much push it takes to take the fluid in. So we started, it was a little bit hard, a little bit went in, we put some more in, more is coming. And the animation broke, it's supposed to go up here, I don't know why it's not doing it. Unreliable Google, there it did it. So it gets easier to push in as we get higher saturation. All right, we're finished with the project. It's all going to come back out though. What do you think?
No.
Well, you're an insider. She's right though. It will not come out. Here's the technical reason is that as you go back after injection ends, it doesn't follow the same pathway. It's harder, it snaps off, bubbles get left behind. And so that when it comes back to stabilization, it's still got a lot of CO2 trapped. We know this really robustly because oil and gas won't all come out. We leave a lot of oil and gas in the subsurface that's still down there and we can't get it out except for conniptions we could talk about. Let me tell you, if you think that's a little, I'll tell you another story. It's this hysteresis is why you have to do laundry. So where's my water bottle? Anyway, if I pour If I pour water on the table, what'll happen if I pour water on this table? It's not permeable. You think I shouldn't do it, it's gonna make a mess, right? Right, so that's why this capillarity matters for safety. If I pour it on the table, I can wipe it off. If I pour it on a raincoat, I don't, but if I pour this on the porous media, most people know that has these small holes is your shirt. If you don't trust me, look through your shirt. It's got little holes in it that are about the same size as the holes in those rocks. And you know the performance of that really well. I mean, I could do it here and now, right? I could pour water on my shirt. What do you think's gonna happen? You know already, right?
When? It's already
Oh, okay. What's it gonna pour water on my shirt? And this is, and I poured more than I want. It's spread out. They spread out a little bit, right? Spread out some. Is it gonna spread out and rest and come out on the neighbors?
No,
Why not?
science?
Yes, give this man a brownie. Why will, it's because of this. It's stuck in those small spore spaces. The capillary process is so powerful and it will not spread indefinitely. Now, can I get it out? If this was bug juice or lunch, can I wipe it off?
No.
Why not? Capillary forces. It is stuck by this physics. It's real robust physics. So that's why you have to do laundry. You have to wash it out with lots of water and soap. So the storage permanence is because you know it completely well, even though it's a new use of this concept. It's really robust, okay? When you talk about insurance, the need for insurance, remember, probably won't come out because I can't do laundry in this model. I'd have to turn it on its side, yeah.
So if it doesn't come out, how much can it take and would we ever run out?
Yes, you have to put in enough. The rate limiting step is pressure. You can't bust it loose. This model is a good example. This model is not super strong. The Earth is actually the actual Earth a mile deep with 3 dimensions is considerably stronger than my plexiglass model. But if I took a really big balloon pump, which I have trouble getting the small balloon pump, if I get a really big one, it makes the air, the proxy CO2 come out the holes, and it can lift water along the well itself. It'll break the model. So yes, so these guys from Exxon carefully calibrate how much through measurements. You hire a consultant, an engineering company. They will actually measure the strength of the rock, and it's quite well known. And you put that in your permit, and you do 90% of the pressure that you're allowed. You have to calculate that pressure. You also have to consider seismicity. We'll talk about seismicity if we don't run out of time. So you have to calculate the amount of pressure that you can put in, and then you have to also not overfill it to make it come out the sides of, especially your lease, but also the area that you prepared. So good. All right. I hope you know that this is my main message. The commodity is pressure space. Thank you for that question. People have been talking about an analogy with oil and gas, where the thing of what we usually, we geoscientists or y'all who are thinking about oil and gas law, think about where the trap, right, and the reservoir, and that's their main focus. But actually, for something, this is making a one-way trip. The thing that's limiting us is how much water we can push out. So I pushed out some water when I put in that CO2. And if I don't have a big tank, if I'm not prepared, I'll have a problem. This is really well known in Safe Drinking Water Act underground injection control parlance. Is called the area of review. That's the area where you have to, where the pressure will be elevated, and it'll be elevated such that you could cause endangerment risk to the fresh water. So any feature, especially a legacy well, but anything else that could raise, so that, whoops, come on, thing, animation is not. The area of review is this area where the pressure is elevated enough so that you're seeing risk, and you have to manage that aggressively. It's a really significant issue in Texas where we have a lot of legacy wells. So you guys need to pay attention. This area of review is by law and by the Railroad Commission's rules has to be managed by the operator. You have to make a prediction whether the pressure is going to be elevated, how much is the pressure going to be elevated. So your eye is drawn to the plume. Yeah, you have to manage that too. It has to stay on the lease, but you also have to, the area where pressure is elevated has to be managed correctly also in order to avoid endangerment of drinking water resources. Law is strict, law is good. needs to be done correctly, and the rules we have for managing property, for managing mineral rights, all have to be coordinated with this physics. I'm not gonna belabor it, but you got the point? All right. So the animation, actually, I hope will show up, so it shows you this area of review, and the lease area, what we could, is just plume at this point. But then we have an area around it that has to be managed. And how big that is, how we define it exactly. Also, if two people are using it, they could come into, the two of them add up to more than one of them, then two of them separately, two of them together. There's a bunch of things. So the displacement of brine is, since I'm on the technical side, the displacement of brine is a key thing. I think that's the end of me. No, I gotta do, all right. So the storage rights belong to the surface owner. There's a bill floating around, so it's clear, but it seems that the legal precedent, storage rights belong to the surface owner. What does the owner own? It's, we talk about it with analogy for oil and gas, but maybe it's not quite enough because it doesn't deal with the pressure space. I don't know. California just said, Sue, we understand what you mean, but we're gonna wait till we have a complaint. That's okay. So it means that another person can't use the space around it, around where the pressure is elevated. And most of the companies that are leasing outside of their plume so that they can't be encroached upon by neighbors who might cause cause pressure interference and diminish their capacity. You ask about capacity. Someone else is pumping in, taking up. If I start pumping here and here, I'll run out of space. So does it? AOR does not currently have value, although people do get some leasing rights. They don't get how much they get compensated, maybe different than the area over the plume. So how does an existing project hold its territory? If another one comes in, this is what happened with saltwater disposal in the Permian. If you guys are following that, many of you are, is that it was okay for the first guy, and the other guy over there, and then 22 more came in, and altogether they're using up too much. They're using more space than there is available. So they're overusing the space, and it's squirting up the top, causing seismicity at depth, yada yada. I can talk about this endlessly, but that's what happened. Is they didn't manage it right. Why did they not manage it right? Because class 2, it's a quarter-mile area review set. Can it be larger? Yeah, it's allowed. They just have to know that the problem will make it larger. So the Railroad Commission is working its way through the whole situation with y'all, trying to figure it out. Is it going to be a problem for CO2 for class 6? Maybe. We have to, we all know about it. So the problem will get reduced. Exactly the strategy about who gets, y'all may need to decide who first in, everybody equal, who decides? Railroad Commission decides, a little murky, all right? See and if multiple users get it, if someone comes in beside you, they make the area of pressure elevation bigger. You see why? This model really shows you, if I start injecting over pressure, we like using a big pump on it. Okay.
So we're a little out of time. Can we move into risks and policy?
Yeah, I will. I'm almost done. We're almost there. There was a mention of enhanced oil recovery. This is the traditional use of CO2. Great deal is known. I'm not going to belabor it. What do? CO2 is a solvent. You put it in, it combines with oil, makes the oil swell. You can get oil that was stuck. It was stuck as residual oil, like the water in my shirt. When I get oil out, I could use a solvent. If I spill oil on my shirt, heaven forbid, I can use a solvent, that'll get it out. So that's what the CO2 is acting as a solvent at those depths. You produce the CO2 and oil and brine at the surface. It only counts as storage if you send it back around, but it is in fact sent back around as a standard operating procedure, but you have to do the accounting. So you have to report in the old days, 2 years ago, it was called Subpart RR, the Clean Air Act. You do the accounting and show that that you're putting it, it's all going round and round like the dry cleaners, and that there's nothing taken off site. You could take it off site. You could move it off to another acreage, for example. So it needs to have accounting to count as storage. It does count as storage. You have to do the life cycle. There's oil produced, yada yada, but it works. Okay, I won't do this. Use older permitting. The risks. You want to talk about risks? They're not. Everyone wants to talk about risks, and they're surprisingly boring. We try to make them in our office. So, I mean, so we have a lab we do with students to the risk of groundwater, and we take proxy tanks of groundwater and rocks, and we inject CO2 in it, and we have the students measure what happens, and they can measure it, but they can also drink it. So there's a risk. It's not allowed to put the CO2 in the groundwater because you can't put any injectate in the groundwater. It's not allowed. It's forbidden, and it's enforced, and it's been managed in class 1. It will be managed correctly in class 6. I have confidence. The risk to groundwater is not large because of the nature of CO2 and because of the strictness of the rules and because of the maturity of the business. The atmosphere. So if CO2 comes back up a well, it'll come out with force. It's not much risk to the atmosphere. It doesn't come out. You realize that you can't produce a well very effectively without a pump. So the CO2 that comes out of a well will come out for a while, and then it'll just like an old oil well in the days, it will die itself down. It doesn't have a net impact on the atmosphere so much. It is a local hazard though, because it's coming out with force. And health impacts. I don't know where to bog down in this. CO2 is really well tolerated by most living things because they're part of our respiration. Yep. But there's a limit of how much we can have. It's like water. We tolerate water, but you can drown. So CO2 is just like drowning. If there's too much of it and you can't breathe properly, or you have too much in your metabolism, it'll kill you dead, like water. It's about the same risk as water. It's a little more exciting because you can't necessarily see it. So that's why the drama. Maybe that's a succinct version of the health risk. We could talk more. You can tolerate the current atmospheric load is not the health problem, but if you're going to work in a winery where they're producing a lot of CO2 in a confined space where it won't be ventilated properly, you have to protect your breathing because you're in fact going into something that's saturated. CO2 is denser than air, so you can go in it like water and effectively drown in it. It also has a metabolic effect, like why cures you on hiccups. So it's a hazard, and there have been deaths in wineries. There haven't been deaths for CO2 anywhere that I know of in the field except cows and some. If you sleep on the ground, it's a hazard. I might be being glib, but I can talk about this some more. I do seismicity. I don't want to get stuck because we need to move on. All things that go in cause acoustic events. The seismic people are really strict. Any kind of acoustic event, sound that comes out of the earth is called a seismic event. It's like calling all wind hurricanes, so it kind of confuses people. Well, we're really concerned about, so I've heard it, you put the headphones on, inject CO2, you can hear it. It sounds like Rice Krispies. Rice Krispies are in fact a seismic event. So they're full of compressed air and they're snap, crackling, popping. So subsurface will snap, crackle, pop. We can, if we put more pressure than is tolerable, cause something that's close to the critical strength to slip, and it can be a felt event. Happened with saltwater disposal in Oklahoma and in DFW in West Texas with some geothermal projects. It's moderately well known how to avoid it, not absolutely well known how to avoid it because some of the seismic events are surprises. So we monitor them. We can see the precursor events, the snap, crackle, pop. So they give warning. In Texas, it's really different. The risk of seismicity in West Texas is extremely different than the risk of seismicity in East Texas. It's in Gulf Coast, Texas. Gulf Coast, Texas, the rocks, they slip against each other all the time, but they don't make a noise. So there's not much seismicity because their rocks are slipped with peaceful, non-noise bearing, no energy stored. So takeaway message on risks. I'm sorry if I'm being glib. I actually am really interested in rips and talk for time. But the thing I want you to take away is that they're not zero. We have to deal with them. We have pretty mature tools for dealing with them in the regulatory environment, in industry standards. My own group at UT makes risks, and we have. You want to know our personal experience with creating this, that, the other problem? We do them in the lab, in the field to create them, so we know how to monitor what to do. They're very well known, and the management techniques are quite mature. So is that a nuanced view of risk? I think that's the end of me. Yes, Emma returns.
Everyone's favorite part, policy.
You see.
Monica, how am I
We've got about 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Sorry, I'm off.
Oh, no, no, you're all good.
Telling stories.
I'll try to go as fast as I can, and folks can come up with questions if they'd like. Maybe just feel free to shout a 2-minute warning or something. Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Oh, backwards. All right. Okay, so I'm going to be covering some of the policy side related to carbon capture and storage. A pretty simple way that I like to look at what the policy needs are is to acknowledge what projects need to succeed. You can see them listed up here. Projects need clear permitting pathways. They need viable project economics, market opportunities, predictable permitting timelines, available geologic storage, access to pore space, long-term risk management and liability clarity, and then public confidence and stakeholder coordination and support. And you'll note that I put on here whether or not they've been addressed or partially addressed in Texas. Some of these policy areas of discussion I'll be sharing today just so you know what they are. They may or may not be near-term considerations for Texas, but they're important to be aware of when you're talking about carbon management in a policy context. So starting us off here with clear permitting pathways, with the acquisition of Class 6 primacy in Texas, this has been partially addressed. Texas received Class 6 primacy from EPA in late 2025. For those of you that don't know what this means, it means that the permitting authority for Class 6 wells, which are used to inject carbon dioxide underground, shifted from EPA to the Railroad Commission of Texas because the commission showed that it could meet or exceed EPA's standards of permitting. And supporters for this primacy effort argued that it would give Texas more direct control over permitting, that Texas agencies are most familiar with Texas geology, and that it would help provide greater certainty and potentially faster timelines for project developers. Multiple agencies are involved in the regulation of carbon capture, transport, and storage. The Railroad Commission is who's going to be working on the geologic storage side of things, the injection side of things. The Texas Commission on Environmental Quality is who's going to be handling those air and water permits. Think of just specifically that capture facility add-on at an industrial or power facility. The General Land Office might come into play occasionally for the leasing of state lands and pore space. And then the Railroad Commission is also responsible for intrastate pipeline safety. Okay. And generally, when I'm talking about policy today and storage, we're going to be thinking about the Railroad Commission. So next up, in terms of what projects need, they're going to need viable economics and market opportunities. Earlier, we discussed 45Q and emerging markets. Those incentives help for sure, and they make some projects viable, but economics do remain one of the biggest barriers to deployment at many facilities, especially when you're thinking about cement or steel. Natural gas power capture costs are a little higher for those sectors. And recognizing this challenge and the opportunity that the state has to deploy carbon management in general, Texas has explored a number of incentives over the years aimed at boosting carbon capture deployment and attracting investment to the state. As of today, most of those incentives are fairly narrow in scope or no longer active in practice. And because of that, 45Q does remain the main driver for projects in the state. Okay. And some policy options have been proposed in recent years, including tax exemptions and other mechanisms to encourage storage deployment. And while these proposals that you're seeing on the board here, they weren't enacted, but they do highlight some of the policy tools that legislators have considered in the past and may continue to be part of discussions in the future. For more policy ideas related to state incentives, you can also look at a roadmap that GPI put together earlier this past year after discussions with stakeholders. Okay, I'm not going to get too deep into this just because of timing today, but I did want to flag a recent development in Texas in case it pops up in discussion in the near future. ERCOT recently approved a Energy Attribute Certificate Program, or EAC program. This was about 2 weeks ago. These are voluntary market-based certificates that provide more detailed information about how, when, and where the electricity is generated, including hourly tracking of energy attributes. And from a carbon management perspective in general, the significance is that these could create a new mechanism for customers to support and validate investments in emerging technologies. Okay. Next up, projects need predictable permitting timelines because a lot of investment goes into ensuring these projects deliver on time. Companies making these large investment decisions want to communicate to their investors about how long this permitting is going to take and when projects can move forward. And as this pertains to Texas, at least, as application volumes grow, especially if we continue to see this surge of interest in the state, agency workload may also increase, making permitting capacity and timelines important considerations moving forward. Those permitting delays can increase costs, create an uncertainty, affect project schedules. And so many states are evaluating, okay, how do we support our program as we're regulating? As I mentioned earlier, Texas recently received Class 6 primacy, giving the commission authority over Class 6 storage permitting. And this was an important milestone for the state. And over this next year, these next couple of years, those permitting timelines are going to emerge as applications move through the process. And that's when we'll be able to tell, hey, do they have the capacity that they need? Are those permits moving on time and on schedule? Or is additional funding needed? Okay. And if they are, policy options could include a legislative appropriation specifically tied to Class 6 permitting. Also, if there's confusion or ambiguity around permitting timelines, there are also opportunities for more effective data sharing. You can see this is the EPA's permit tracker. This is for all states that don't have primacy. This is where you check in for updates to see where projects are at. So there's always opportunities to enhance transparency around permitting. All right. The next thing that projects need are accessible pore space. As I mentioned earlier, Texas has a lot of great geologic storage. They're leading in that area. There's so much opportunity in the state. The question remains, okay, can operators amalgamate that and use it for those projects? So for large-scale projects, that can mean assembling pore space rights from many different landowners. Some states have adopted processes known as pore space amalgamation or unitization. This allows multiple parcels to be combined into a single storage unit once a specified landowner consent threshold has been reached. Texas does not currently have a statutory pore space amalgamation or unitization process for CO2 storage. Again, this may or may not be something that the state is interested in, but just want to flag because it comes up a lot in conversations around carbon storage. So right now in Texas, developers need to secure agreements from all affected landowners, although mechanisms exist to deal with missing or unknown owners. But as projects grow, this can present some complications, especially when you have many landowners. And so it's just something to continue to consider as you see increased project proposals in the state or operators dealing with issues related to this. And if it does end up being a potential problem, there are many different policy precedents in other states for Texas to consider. But as of right now, what I flagged is that Texas should just monitor, are there any emerging challenges, and evaluate those impacts as projects scale. Okay, I won't go too deep into this because Sue talked about pressure space. But again, Texas has a lot of existing uses of the subsurface. Those pressure effects from projects can turn into a policy or regulatory topic when you have projects that are located close together. And so as deployment grows, the state may want to undertake an initiative to ensure that we have adequately studied and addressed this issue, especially if we do see an increase in projects. Okay, next up is liability and long-term risk management. This is sometimes talked about as long-term stewardship or long-term liability. Again, this might not necessarily be one of the most immediate policy considerations for Texas today, but it's a topic that comes up frequently in discussions around carbon storage, so I wanted to make sure you were aware of it. Storage projects are designed to maintain that carbon dioxide for the long term, thousands of years. So states have developed frameworks that define responsibility for monitoring, stewardship, and liability after injection ends. And as projects move through their full life cycle, questions can arise about how those long-term obligations should be managed. There are traditional insurance products and risk management tools that are available. Some states have also established statutory frameworks that provide additional clarity around long-term responsibility. And one of those is transferring liability to the state, or creating state trust funds. And you can see here what Texas has done today, trying to breeze through this. The state has currently established a framework for long-term stewardship through a fund that is called the Anthropogenic Carbon Dioxide Storage Trust Fund. This supports activities like monitoring, maintenance, enforcement, and response actions associated with geologic storage sites. Texas currently has not done anything related to the transfer of long-term liability to the state for onshore projects. For offshore projects, Texas does have limited transfer provisions for CO2 stored I believe in a specific repository, but there is currently no comparable onshore liability transfer framework. And like I said, this can also be managed through traditional insurance. So the potential considerations in this area for the state to consider in future years is just to monitor operator and investor experience as projects mature. Are project investors confident in the way long-term risk is being managed? Or would certainty from the state provide this additional buffer? Again, I think it's just an area for future study amid operator conversations. All right, final policy gap here is public confidence in stakeholder coordination and support. So, as you all know, Texas is a large state, and carbon management discussions are often occurring in individual regions, within individual industries, or different stakeholder groups, environmental groups. You could probably name any type of stakeholder group, and they will have had an individual conversation on carbon storage. And as I mentioned earlier, while Texas has this tremendous potential for carbon capture and storage, there's currently no single forum dedicated to coordinating stakeholders and identifying shared policy priorities for the state. Other states have addressed this challenge through carbon storage or sequestration task forces that bring together regulators. So in this case, it would be the Railroad Commission, industry, researchers, landowners, and community or nonprofit representatives to evaluate these topic areas, as I've been discussing today, and develop recommendations. And Texas has explored models like this for other emerging technologies. So for example, they established a Hydrogen Production Policy Council to study policy issues related to hydrogen. And this just provides one example of how the state could coordinate a more robust policy discussion around carbon management. And then as far as public confidence and engagement goes, as I'm sure many of you know, when you hear about a new technology, you have questions, you want to know where you're going to get those answers. And carbon management for many people is new. These projects involve multiple permits, agencies, and regulatory processes, and there is a lot of information out there, but it's often spread across different agency websites, permit filings, project materials, and public notices. So as deployment grows, stakeholders will inevitably have questions about how these projects are regulated, which agencies are responsible for oversight, what opportunities exist for public participation, and how they can access project information. So a few policy options or suggestions here are to develop some sort of user-friendly, publicly accessible carbon management information hub, where if a member of a project had a question, that's where they're directed. Another is to just generally continue as permits increase, to increase public communication on permitting and regulatory processes. So I think the goal here for the state isn't to advocate for or against projects, but just to make information easy to access for the public. Okay. For anyone who has more policy questions around carbon management in general, I just want to point you to a roadmap that the Great Plains Institute developed over this past year. We reached out to 100 or so organizations and brought together many of them in roundtables and one-on-one meetings to develop 50 policy recommendations related to carbon capture, transport, utilization, hydrogen, carbon storage, and direct air capture in this state. None of these recommendations are consensus-based. We heard a lot of policy opinions from everyone across Texas, and I think there's still a lot of work to do to find out what, if anything, should be proposed during legislative session in this year or the coming years. But these recommendations should give you a place to start considering what the state's needs may look like. And with that, I think I'm done. But please feel free to ask me any questions.